Specializing in grants, tenders, and funding consultancy, Keith Whelan provides high-level assistance to local, state, and federal government, not-for-profit organizations, and private enterprises in planning for and accessing extra income streams. Keith creates funding strategies that enable organizations to approach grants and tenders in a proactive manner. He has worked in the Grants and Philanthropy sector in Ireland and Australia across both the public and private sector. This includes ANU Canberra, the University of Adelaide, the University of Sydney, New South Wales Health, and others on their respective tendering processes for commercial contracts. Keith, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Now, from the top, can you explain to us how does one get involved in commercial grant support?
I suppose there's a myriad of different ways. Really, my background came from the university sector through alumni and foundation, but through commercial, basically, I think that you'll have a lot of people there who work in business development who'll be looking at the tender sphere and into the grant sphere as well in the respective commercial entities. While it's not a designated role per se in Australia as it would be overseas, I think more and more it's coming to the fore because of the viable opportunity that can be sought both through grants and tender funding for commercial entities. And we're seeing more and more opportunities arise from both the public and private sector. So commercial entities have either sourced it internally and they use persons with business storytelling or someone from a journalistic background or an education background, that they've sourced consultants to come in like myself, or even grants writers to come in and look at what they can apply for in terms of the provision of a grants calendar that's relevant to them, as well as basically the application itself. So it's pretty, I won't say ad hoc, but certainly there's a massive base out there in tendering more than grants at the moment in terms of commercial attainment that you can get through respective firms as consultants. But in the grants realm, I think there's very few people doing what I do, which is actually educating entities in what they can apply for and how to apply for those grants, rather than actually doing the grants for those commercial entities, whether they be startups, entrepreneurs, pop-ups, SMEs, and the major corporates themselves, and being au fait what's out there. I think the biggest thing for most people in the commercial sector is they're not aware of what is available to them in terms of grants, and then they're not au fait with how to apply for those grants.
And you started doing this originally in Ireland. How did you end up in Australia? And what are the main differences that you see in the grant processes between the two countries?
I came to Australia because my partner's Australian 8 years ago. And the main difference I've seen basically in 8 years of operating in the industry here is that we still have a long way to go in terms of initiatives that are pretty much commonplace in Europe through public-private partnerships, social enterprise, social procurement, crowdfunding, which we've seen sourcing for local government and state government entities in Europe, which is not really to the fore here in Australia. And people, when I talk about it, kind of look at me blankly, even though it's very much the norm in the States, Canada, UK, and the rest of Europe. But we're very much a couple of years behind what's happening in Europe and North America. And I think that's the quintessential difference I've seen in 8 years here.
And what can grants do for your business?
Well, obviously, it's an extra revenue stream, and you should focus on it as much as you would any other identifiable revenue stream at the end of the day. So the effort that you put into marketing your business, the effort you saw to seek out stakeholders or shareholders or angel investors, you should put towards grants as well. Of course, it is a competitive industry, but grants is an identifiable opportunity for you at the end of the day as well. And I think companies and businesses are not looking at it with that respect, and they need to focus on it more and think about the actual outcomes and returns on investment potentially for them. And if not grants, certainly tenders, because of the size of the marketplace that's out there in terms of public and private sector financing through tenders. But grants is pretty much the same ilk. We're talking millions of dollars here in either grants or tenders that's available from the public sector. And it seems to be a last minute decision or an addendum decision for businesses to look at it basically. And they need to be more proactive than reactive, I believe, in what they're sourcing.
And in its broadest sense, what sort of grants exist there?
Well, I think for companies, whether we start up, you have tax rebates, basically schemes, you have tax initiatives from Austrade and Industry, business.gov.au, a number of government initiatives that are out there through all the tiers of government. And the R&D tax incentive is huge at the moment for most companies out there. The focal point really for state and federal government is export, manufacturing, job employment, basically, sustainability, creating new business sectors, as we have with the Prime Minister, Mr. Turnbull, talking about innovation in Australia. So they're kind of the focal areas, and certainly what I'd be looking for in terms of development of your companies, in how you can set up, create a new manufacturing base here in Australia, how you can look at an export market, how government can help you basically in placing yourself in that export market through some of the forums they initiate in North America, Southeast Asia and throughout the world. And how can you avail of the resources that are there from a mentoring and training program and having a free consultant provided to you by government, which is all part of the grants process, let alone what you can claim back through an R&D tax rebate. But again, I don't think people are aware of it, and certainly even listing the websites to them, they're not even au fait with what's out there. So I think companies need to become au fait pretty fast, because this is a great government resource at state and federal level that's available to companies, and you should avail of it.
And how do organizations find out about these grants? And more importantly, how do they go through the application process?
I think most of them, again, as I previously said, it's on an ad hoc basis. It's kind of word of mouth, or one of their colleagues or their competitors has actually been successful in attaining a grant, and they've looked at what grant they've applied for and how successful they've been. Or they are au fait with what's happening in government, basically, in receiving push notifications from government and when grants are opening and grants are about to close. But they need to network. I mean, they need to put themselves out there. People can only help you as a company if they know you exist in your profile. So at the end of the day, they need to contact the likes of these agencies, Austrade and Ausindustry, Department of Innovation and Industry here in New South Wales, and look at what's available out there, contact them, talk to them, get them on side, say, this is what I'm trying to do, this is my business plan, this is my capital expenditure, this is my marketing plan, help me develop this new niche product service that I want to develop in New South Wales and Australia, and bring revenue into the country at the end of the day. I think when they look at how they can go forward with that, I think that's where usually I come into the equation, to be perfectly honest, whereby they need a consultant to advise them on a lot of the processes that are in play in terms of business grants, because it's an expectation that you're going to extrapolate out of a lot of the material you've already drafted as a company. What I mean by that is that you've already have your business plan, your strategic plan, your marketing plan, your risk management. You've done a statement of need exercise, and you extrapolate all the evidence out of that to substantiate your answers in the grants applications. A lot of companies don't have that mindset at the moment, and certainly not companies of SME stature or startups or entrepreneurs. And that's really where I come in as a consultant, that we build up the case argument before the application and then assess, review and appraise their application before it goes in.
And so you had mentioned that oftentimes a lot of these opportunities come up ad hoc. If a client was to engage you, is that typically a fee-for-service model, or is that based on a retainer so that you can identify these ongoing opportunities for clients?
It's both, actually. We do grants calendars on a retainer basis for clients, which we do on an annual or monthly basis depending on the client's needs. When it comes to the actual grant application itself, it's a fee for service. It's a flat hourly rate we charge to assess, review and appraise those applications for clients. In some cases, although usually in the minutiae these days, we actually draft and write the application and proofread and edit for clients, and that's a fee based on success.
And so, having started this overseas and now bringing your knowledge to Australia, when you're engaged to work with a client, what are some of the common issues that you encounter when beginning that consultation process?
In some instances, resistance to change. Some clients basically do not want to change their processes in lieu of what is being asked of them, basically. And people need to understand that there's two acronyms really that are to the fore when it comes to grants in Australia, let alone the world. VFM, which is value for money, and WeFM, what's in it for me. And in terms of the funding body, it's always about them. The application should always be geared to them, and what they set out as their selection criteria and KPIs and ROI should be addressed. It's not about the company themselves. And companies I've dealt with in the past have that resistance to change, thinking that they want to write all about themselves. It's never about you. It's how you fit into a collaborative process that you're going to dispense the grant on time and on budget and deliver on the identifiables as set out in the grant. And that's where I usually see the resistance to change from companies themselves. They struggle to get their head around that a lot of the time. And secondly, the resources and the time and capacity that's required to actually write a grant application. Several drafts that you have to do, not over a number of weeks. It can't be a last minute application because it'll look haphazard. And that when you apply for the grant, it's only 50% of the process, because what happens if you actually get the grant? You're successful, and then you have to do auditing, and you have to do acquittal, and you have to do reporting and evaluations. And I think a lot of companies don't think about that onerous obligation on them as well when they actually get the grant.
So you're already talking and addressing about this now, but in terms of if I run an organization for myself and in terms of trying to demonstrate the value that I can offer by getting a grant, what should be in an application when applying for these grants?
Really, you need to look at how to sell yourself. how you can endear yourself. So indicatively, I can see runs on the board that you're a successful business, you have a certain turnover, you have a certain amount of staff, you're au fait with basically opening new markets, you want to bring something new and innovative. That's a key word to the marketplace, innovation. And you need to look at basically how you can look at collaborations. Government doesn't like silos. So how you're working with other companies or other providers in your sector and outside of your sector, and how you're ambitious in nature and you have a 5-year plan and you know where you're going basically, and that they can invest trust in you. And certainly there's no governance issues in your company. There's no risk management issues in your company. You're not operating at a loss financially. So all of these things must be considered before applying. And sometimes the most astute decision you can make in terms of applying for a grant is actually not applying for the grant, thereby not wasting your time and, more importantly, not wasting the funding body's time.
Well, that sets up 2 further questions on that. So you mentioned that governments don't like silos. So oftentimes when organizations do go into tender for government bids, there is a lot of collaboration between them. Why is that a good thing?
Because it mitigates the risk at the end of the day. So for government, basically, they want to enhance the sector. They want to enhance the genre of industry that's moving forward. So for them, to speak bluntly, it's killing 2 birds with 1 stone, per se, to use the old adage. And very much it's looking at collaborative nature rather than it's increasing capacity for both companies, because their value adds obviously bring in another entity into the equation and a skill set that you mightn't have internally in your company and then sourcing it externally. So it's a value add. And I think companies need to look at that rather than looking at the other company's identifiable competition, identifiable partnerships, because certainly the predominant word now in a lot of grants realms out there is relationship building. Companies in a business sector or any other sector need to contemplate how they can increase capacity in their application by actually partnering with another service in their own sector.
And you've identified that sometimes it's best not even to go in. But what happens if you've taken the time, you've brought on someone like yourself, you've gone through the process, you've spent months putting it together, and ultimately you don't get the grant? What are the takeaways from that?
The takeaways is that there's no such thing as an unsuccessful grant apart from actually not getting the money. It's learning from the process. That application will more than likely come around again in some shape or form next year. And you've already prepped for that. Basically, what we have to do then is obviously edit, proofread, and amend said application. We don't do copy and paste, obviously, in grant writing. So we actually redraft it and look at the eligibility again for next year and see is it feasible to enter that application in again. So I tell my clients never to perceive it that you just didn't get the grant, because as the guarantee I give them from the outset is rejection. And what I mean by that is that they're not going to get a grant. In fact, if they're averaging 4 to 5 grants out of 10, they're doing quite well in the success ratio. So really they have to look at being competitive and look at that if they build the application, it has relevance in other applications that will come up in other business terms. So they're not doing themselves a disservice or a disjustice.
If your organization doesn't get the grant, is there a feedback loop with government? Will they assist you in identifying maybe areas that you should be improving?
It's rare. It's very rare that they do, basically, because you can imagine the deluge of applications they actually get in any once grants funding round. So really where you have to instigate that relationship is at the outset rather than at the end, and really it's now nearly mandatory with a lot of grants that are out there from federal level and probably going down to state level as well in New South Wales, where you have to attend the online webinar information session or you have to attend the face-to-face briefing. And that's to instigate a relationship with them, basically, and understand what they're trying to achieve and not be haphazard yourself. But to answer your question directly, no, there's not going to be that much feedback coming back. So it's a self-learning process. There's also the evaluation process, which we provide as a consultancy to clients, looking back on it as well and trying to source those details for them. But no, it's not going to be open to them.
Well, if you'd like to find out more about Keith Whelan or contact him to assist with your grant tendering process, please check out his website, www.thegrantsguy.com.au. Keith, thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you.